This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz Podcast.
Here's one for you, Stugatz, from Anthony Slater. Chris Paul has missed 41 of his 60 shots against the Clippers. The Suns have an offensive rating of 97.7 with him on the floor this series and a 112.5 rating with him off it. The Clippers, without Kawhi Leonard, are okay as a basketball team, but this is one of those places where coaches of the year need to do some math on how healthy one of their key guys is, and it's next to impossible. This is one of those spots, right? To do anything other than go with Chris Paul ride it till the very end.
Oh, you have to at this point. I mean, I think Monty Williams probably views Chris Paul as the reason they're in the position that they're in.
I remind you that it wasn't but last week that you were saying that the easy call is get Ben Simmons the hell off the court. And this was last week that you were doing this.
Right, because he can't shoot. And I realize that Chris Paul is not shooting well, but he can shoot, Dan. He can hit twos. He can hit threes if he gets hot.
Healthy Chris Paul can, and I still trust him with mid-range jumpers. But again, he's missed 41 of his 60 shots. And it would appear, right? We can, and we'll get Amin in here in a second, because I am not advocating for the benching of Chris Paul. I'm just saying, like I did last week, that you ride with the guys who are your best guys. And look, man, the Nets were doing it with Harden, and Harden couldn't get around anybody in that series. I'm simply pointing out to you that the numbers are not very good on Chris Paul, and this becomes difficult math because Devin Booker, since Stugatz, he is not as accurate. Devin Booker with that mask, that is a difficult thing to play with when you are a shooter and when comfort matters, when rhythm matters, and we've seen those guys throw those masks off, and that sometimes, Stugatz, when we're talking, it's always amazing to me that the difference in legacies and how we view someone like Giannis is something like a shoe size. And these teams are not healthy in the Western Conference. These teams are not what they have been all season at their best when they are healthy. And you start changing the math, right? Because you are someone who has been very critical of Chris Paul over the years. And you will find a way, even if they advance to the finals, even if they win the title, you will find a way to criticize Chris Paul and say, well, you didn't do it as the number one, Chris Paul. Devin Booker is the number one.
Yeah, and Ayton's the two. I probably will do that.
Ayton was useless last night.
He was, yeah. But so was Chris Paul, kind of, right? I mean, they're 2-0 without Chris Paul in this series. They're 1-2 with Chris Paul in this series. It's like, I don't know. I have a lot to do here with Chris Paul.
It's a bit of a pretzel.
Yes, there's a lot on the line here. I mean,
and we will bring in our expert, Amin Elhassan, in a second to give us some insight on all of these things.
Now, one of the things I feel like is kind of being under-discussed is he tested positive for COVID. Now, he's vaccinated, so I can't imagine it's affect him physically, but you talk all the time about when players jump aboard the moving train that is the playoffs. Getting off and getting back on must be really hard, and I feel like just generally, like, because COVID has been in our lives for so long, like, the College World Series had a team that had to back out because they had positive tests and there were people in contact tracing. And there were pitchers playing in the field, right? Completely bastardized the College World Series. Yesterday, Croatia went out of the Euros. One of their best players has COVID and missed the game. And we're just like, all right, carry on. He had COVID. Like, and it's one of those things where you can't stop the world every time that something COVID-related happens. But Chris Paul missed part of this series because of COVID and is trying to get back on this moving trade after having had COVID.
Are you saying that Cameron Payne is perhaps the better option here, the better CP? I think you are.
I am not saying that.
He was 17 of 34 in the first two games, Dan. They were 2-0.
I am not saying that. I am just saying that this Suns team that was great all season is clearly, with those two players, some fraction of at their best, depleted in a way that allows Paul George to go in there and beat them when he's on the road with Kawhi Leonard. I am not willing to do the things that you do and get out there with the take that they should bench Chris Paul. I just find
great take.
I just find those decisions hard to make for coaches. You, as last week, were saying it was so easy to bench Ben Simmons, and you don't have to be consistent about anything. I want to instead just marvel. I believe that one of my greatest, I agree with myself on this, one of my greatest basketball takes is that the merging of Marcus Morris and Markieff Morris, if I take the two of them and merge them, I have created the symbol for an average NBA starter that is the best representation of the average NBA starter. And I mean this as no disparagement on the average. To be an average NBA starter is to be great at basketball. Yep. Just not as great as the people who are above average and just a little bit better than the people who are below average. That if you merge the brothers, the two of them, and Marcus Morris was great last night.
Oh, he was tremendous. 22 points. They needed those 22 points last night, but he can give you 2 the next night. That's what he does.
I do love when desperation is something in sports at this level that you can see physically manifested in a way that was obvious. The way that the Clippers were going after the ball, the aggressive way that they were playing. Now, all of it changes if Paul George misses 15 of 20 jumpers instead of makes 15 of 20 jumpers. And many of them were contested. And he was great last night. But the Clippers were desperate in a way that was obvious caring, right? For all of you who like to form the argument on, I prefer the college game, it's pure, they try harder. There was no absence of trying from the Clippers last night. They were in a building, and when Phoenix came back and cut it to 4, Stugotz, they cut it to 4, and you've got no Kawhi Leonard out there. That would have been an easy time for the Clippers to fold it up because that place was Phoenix was feeling a spirit there that they haven't felt in a really long time.
There is nothing, you're right, like watching a desperate DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, where did he come from?
I prefer desperation when it comes from clear and obvious champions. When you see those desperate Warriors be down or those desperate Heat teams be down against Derrick Rose's Bulls, when it's that kind of obvious, when greatness is desperate, but the 45-win Clippers, which is about what I imagine they would be without Kawhi Leonard, they were clearly and physically and obviously desperate in that game in a way that was fun to watch. I wanted to, before Amin gets here, I did want to ask you about another thing that made an appearance last night, and I don't know how Billy feels about this. I've called this person a blight upon our people, which is not usually a cruelty that I hit people with in sports, but thy name is Angel Hernandez, and you're infuriating, Angel. You're infuriating umpire.
What do you do now?
I mean, he was just Angel Hernandez last night in a way that enrages anyone, and we should all have a union to protect us when we're as bad as our job as he is. Like, I have wanted, during everything that's happened, during the fiasco that is baseball these days of checking pitchers, for a pitcher to, like, check Angel Hernandez's eyes when he is being checked as a retaliatory measure.
Pretty hard to do.
An eye chart, like pull out something, a little light that looks into his eyes, because it's when he's a home plate umpire that it's the most infuriating. Just nobody who's this bad at their job gets to keep it this long. And David Sampson corrected me on something the other day. The baseball union actually lost in the last round, the baseball union, but the umpires union, man, they stay strong and among the strongest unions in the history of unions because Angel Hernandez remains employed.
You gotta feel kind of bad for Angel, though, right? Like, when he got into the game, did you think that he thought that robots were going to be coming for his job and breathing down his neck? Like, everything this guy does now, we have little screens and computers and robots telling you, hey, you're horrible at your job, right? That has to get in your head. If you have people nonstop telling you, you are bad at this, you are one of the worst at this out there, you are historically awful at your job, that has to get in your head, right? Angel has to be looking and thinking, you know what? What's the robot going to say? Let me get this right. And then he makes the wrong call. And then I think we may be to the point, and I don't want to speak for Angel. I don't know him. He seems like a lovely man. Actually, I don't know that to be the case. But you see Angel, and you have to think, you know what? I'm going to show these robots that I'm going to call whatever the hell I want, whether it's right or not. And the robots can come for my job, but they're not going to get it because I'm Angel Goddamn Hernandez. And that may be what's at play now, too. Don't you think?
Well, you say this about him, but I do believe he's delusional. He's claimed that he doesn't get chief assignments, not because he's bad, but because racism.
It is insane that umpires are still calling balls and strikes when we can see on my TV the right answer. I mean, in all of sports.
Nah, come on.
It's insane.
I don't know.
It's part of the charm. I mean,
We're trusting the graphics, too.
I'm on my
be in
couch.
the right spot.
I'm on my couch eating Doritos, and I'm like, oh, that was a ball. And the umpire in the game is calling it a strike.
And we've only been able to see it for a decade.
It's insane. I have prediction in the next 2 or 3 years they have to change it. Right? It's just stupid.
Not with that union.
No.
Not that.
The
union.
umpire can still stand there. You can still get paid. Just you don't make that decision.
That sounds like my kind of job.
Amin
The strike zone's also, by the way, up to the umpire. There's suggestions, knees to chest, here's home plate, but up to the umpire. As long as he's consistent, we're good.
Amin Elhassan, let's give him his customary music here and give the people some good basketball talk as opposed to what it is that we do around here.
Time to talk basketball. Amin knows basketball. He'll teach you basketball. Expert in basketball.
I mean, Chris Paul and Devin Booker, how wounded are both of them? This is not the Suns team. I mean, I know they lost one game last night, but Chris Paul statistically hasn't been very good, and everybody was scoring on Booker last night.
Yeah, I mean, Booker is not exactly a defensive stalwart. He's a guy who's a much improved defender. I've said this before on the show, that he's gone from a negative defender to a positive defender, someone who does not detract from his presence out there. Having said that, he's not guarding Paul George and locking him up like that. He might get a couple of good possessions here and there, but the reality is he's a guy that has to work within a scheme. Chris Paul is the bigger concern here, Dan, because you talk about what he went through, first of all, with the shoulder thing, and now coming out of a COVID protocol. We don't know what his physical state is, so I don't want to make excuses for him, but yeah, last night was not encouraging.
I mean, earlier Dan suggested that the Suns start Cameron Payne. Do you agree with him? He did. I mean, he'll deny it, but he did. He kind of did.
Shout out to Cameron Payne. This dude was in China a year ago,
yeah.
And now he's in the Western Conference Finals. And radio hosts are saying, you know what, he should be starting over Hall of Famer Chris Paul. That is quite the turnaround in just about 12 months.
41 of his 60 shots he's missed against the Clippers. Chris Paul has 97.7 offensive rating with him on the floor this series, 112.5 rating with him off it. Stugotz was saying last week that it should have been easy for Doc Rivers to simply bench Ben Simmons. And what I was saying is how difficult these decisions are for coaches because none of them make the decision to sit down the injured guy. James Harden just played, and you saw that he couldn't get around anybody.
Why am I staring at Chris Cody's crotch?
I don't know.
Question.
That seems like a you problem. I don't know. I don't know why it is that you were doing that. Did you hear anything I said, or were you just distracted by Chris Cody's?
That's my life.
The decision is difficult for a couple of reasons. One is that you have an expectation and a trust in your star to get it right when it most needs to be got right. With Chris Paul, he's the smartest guy on the floor. Everybody on the floor is saying, I'm so much better of a basketball player this year because I got to play with this guy. So down the stretch, you're going to trust him to do those things, to make the right decision, to make everybody better. The other part of it, and this is the part that people like Stugotz never get, is, okay, go ahead and bench Ben Simmons. Let's see how that works out for your career. Like, you guys think that this is like college. I can just bench the guy and I try to teach him a lesson. No, man, there are relationships here that you have to continue to cultivate and manage. And yes, these guys have egos. And yes, they'll be embarrassed if you sit them in the fourth quarter of a playoff game, of a game 7, and just say, yeah, I was trying to win. And especially, it's one thing if you win and you bench the guy. You still have to manage that situation. But if you lose, he had Ben Simmons on the bench in the game 7 in the fourth quarter. You're done. You're done, son.
Isn't the coach's job to give his team the best chance at winning basketball games? Meaning, if Cameron Payne indeed is the healthiher player right now,
you want to make the take. You want to, and you're not brave enough to make it. You're pinning it on me.
I'm going to do it right now. They are 2-0 with Cameron Payne starting in this series. They're 1-2 when Chris Paul starts. Cameron Payne shooting 50% from the field. He's played better in this series. Perhaps because I'm not saying he's a better basketball player. I'm saying he's a healthier basketball player. Perhaps should Monty Williams maybe consider starting Cameron Payne? I would. That's the coach's job.
I think that this series is like Stugatz's dream. Chris Paul versus Paul George. Great. Someone is going to fail, and it's going to be his fault for the series ending not the way they wanted to. And Stugatz wins. Stugatz is the only winner in the Western Conference Finals.
What do you make of Chris Whittingham's suggestion, and he agrees with himself on this, that Giannis is a number 2?
Oh, I was so angry with you. You're usually the man of like measure and kind of really thoughtful takes, and you come out with one of the hottest takes ever. Look, Chris Middleton. You try making Chris Middleton your number 1 and see how many games you win for a season.
They're doing it now.
No, they're not. They're not, because the reality is this: we focus on the last 7 minutes of a game and who did it, and that's our number 1. What about the first 41 minutes? What about the first 70 games? Who's the workhorse? Who's bringing it every night? Who night in, night out we can count on for 29, 30 points, 10 rebounds, 57% from the field, night in, night out. That's your number 1. And then the guy who hops off your back and then does the little stuff at the end, which is useful, which is absolutely necessary, and which is symbiotic with your number 1. That's your closer, but he's not your number 1. In the same way that Robert Horry wasn't the Spurs' number 1 because he hit a bunch of shots at the end.
I don't accept the premise of that last 7 minutes thing. The last 7 minutes thing is everything in basketball. Like, it just is. Like, if you cannot create your own stuff in the last 7 minutes of games, you cannot be your number 1. I'm sorry.
Witty, we don't get to the last 7 minutes if it's not for the first 41. You're acting like the game started with 7 minutes to go. You got to get there first, and there's a guy who carries you to that point every night. Look, Middleton has some nights like that night, and some nights he just kind of, oh, man, I only had 12 points on 5 of 30 shooting tonight. But it's cool. Why is it cool? Because the number 1 is there.
Yes or no, Reggie Jackson, the greatest postseason money grab since Jerome James?
Tim Thomas.
Oh, wow.
Thomas in Phoenix 2006. Because that dude was out of the league. That dude was like persona non grata. He got cut. He got straight up cut. He goes to Phoenix on a minimum. He balls out, and he gets $24 million. I'll tell you the story real quick. So he gets with Phoenix midseason. The Suns go on this conference finals run. He hits big shots in playoff games. At the end of it, after the Suns get eliminated, he says, I'd be an idiot not to come back here. This is the perfect system. I've searched my entire life for a coach like Mike D'Antoni in a system like this to play in, right? Everyone's feeling real confident. July 1, 12:01, Suns get a call from his agent. He says, the Clippers just offered $24 million over 4 years. You have 30 minutes to match. I waited my whole life to play in this place. Also, you have 30 minutes to match this deal.
What's Reggie Jackson going to get next season?
Oh, I think he'll get mid-level. He'll get a nice little $9-10 million range per year thing, because he's not a point guard. Nothing that he's doing in these playoffs that are very impressive are of the point guard variety. They are all, I go out and get buckets, meaning he's really a backup guard. He's like Lou Williams and Jamal Crawford and guys like that. You come in off the bench, you come in and get buckets. I think Reggie Jackson's going to get himself a nice 8-figure deal over like 2 or 3 years.
I like to update the modern reference on Jerome James. I think it's Bismack Biyombo, because that was in the post-salary cap bump when everyone had money, and he got $64 million from Orlando when they already had bigs. $64 million for Bismack Biyombo.
Amin gave you Tim Thomas because he was in that front office that got fooled.
Well, no, we didn't get fooled. We didn't pay him. We didn't pay him. The Clippers paid him.
Oh, but you were ready to pay him. You were ready to pay him.
Not $24 million. Do you know who I work for? $24 million? Oh, man, no, sir.
Give me the best you got on Lillard.
Well, I think, first of all, a lot of people are kind of conflating the issues about the coach, and that's why he's going to leave. No, if Lillard is going to leave, it's because he is not happy with the overall job the front office has done in the last 4 or 5 years, basically since he's been an elite player. It's not because you didn't hire the coach I wanted or you hired the coach I literally didn't want. It's because it's an overall picture thing. And I think for Lillard, he's coming to the realization that, Dan, I heard you talk about it yesterday, that every star goes through at some point, how much of my prime am I going to trust these people to keep not getting me the help that I need? And so no one wants a super team, or no one wants to be the guy who joins a super team. But the reality is you're saying, okay, I'm just going to trust these guys to get it right. How long do you wait?
What'd you make of Pippen yesterday on Dan Patrick?
Look, I know Scottie from having worked with him at the jump. Scottie's a guy that sometimes when he's being interviewed, not like when he's, even on the jump, I think he just says what's on his mind at that moment. And he'll go down that path as far as it goes. Because I remember there was a season where he said, Jordan's the GOAT, no question, LeBron could never come close. And then like a few months later, LeBron's the GOAT, he's better than Jordan, he's the best player I've ever seen. And this was in the same season. So I've always gotten a feeling that Scottie's like, today, I feel like Jordan's the GOAT. Tomorrow, I might feel like LeBron's the GOAT. and everything he says is kind of wishy-washy in that way.
That's fine if you're Stugotz. You don't have to keep track of anything. But when you're constantly making headlines for the things that you say, and you're saying what's on his mind that day, what was on his mind on Dan Patrick was Phil Jackson's a racist. Like, you're not hearing a whole lot of that. Not this day, not yesterday, not the next day.
We've heard that about Phil Jackson being a racist before when he referred to LeBron and Maverick Carter and Rich Paul as LeBron's posse, right? And we went after him then. I don't know Phil Jackson. Maybe he was like one of those people like from Get Out, where he seems like a very nice, friendly, I would have voted for Obama 3 times if I had the chance. But behind closed doors, he says things that are kind of closeted racist or thinly veiled racism. I don't know. All I know is that Scottie might have said that yesterday, and next week he'll say Phil Jackson was one of the kindest men I've ever played with.
Okay.
I don't know.
And yet he said nothing to us.
Okay, and the only thing that's consistent is that when he comes on with us, he doesn't say anything, any of those things. Amin, where can people find you? Is there another place that people can find you other than right here?
Is there another place, he asks? Of course there is. It's called Cinephobe, the podcast where Zach Harper and I review movies that are poorly rated on Rotten Tomatoes and try to ascertain whether they are accurately poorly rated or maybe they didn't get a fair shake. Cinephobe, wherever you get podcasts. This week, it's the last week of Superhero Month. We did a dealer's choice. We gave it up to the fans. We said, here are 4 movies you can pick from. Fantastic Four, any version. Meteor Man, something else I don't remember now. And Blank Man. Blank Man's the movie we did. We did Blank Man starring Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier. Classic.
Next month, John Travolta month. Very exciting. Has there been a release on what the movie, the 4? You've got so many to choose from.
Tomorrow around 7 a.m., we'll get a little bit of news from my press secretary, Anthony Mace, who's also the producer of Cinephobe. And he'll let us know what the first selection of John Travolta month is. I told Michelle, Sasha, and Malia, sit back, relax. We're going to have a hell of a month.
Howard Bryant of Meadowlark Media is now a grizzled veteran. I'm sorry to do this to you, but you are someone who has lived these Pippen years, these Jordan years. It's not a Last Dance documentary / commercial to you, Nike commercial to you. It's something that you experienced in real time coming up through the business. And you hear Scottie Pippen do what he did on Dan Patrick's show yesterday, where, can we get that sound real quick and play it for both Howard Bryant and the audience? Let's just play that sound that we had, 4 hours ago when we were talking to Dan Patrick of Scottie Pippen saying something that was pretty surprising to hear said this flatly.
If you knew that Scottie Pippen had been with the Bulls from 87, battled through the Pistons and every other team that we had to get to those 3 championships, wouldn't you give Scottie Pippen one opportunity to get a last-second shot without Michael Jordan? Like, 1 year without Michael Jordan. Can I get one shot? I'm doing all the dirty work.
But all of that I understand from the basketball standpoint. But when you say a racial move,
well, why would Tony, who's a rookie, get the last-second shot and you put me out of bounds? That's what I mean, racial. Like, that was Scottie Pippen's team.
But
Scottie
Phil
Pippen
then
was
but,
on pace to be an MVP that year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, why would you put him in a position not to be successful? Why wouldn't you put him in a position to succeed? Michael Jordan is not there. So who's next in line for you?
I like talking race stuff, Howard, but I really don't know where to even start there because there's so much in it. Just the hanging on to the narcissism of he just simply deserves to have the last shot, not because it's possible that any other scenario is available to him, but he just deserves it because of all the work he put in with Michael Jordan. This is a guy tired of being in that shadow, man.
Yeah, not only tired of being in the shadow, but tired of being in the shadow. It's like being a middle child or the second child for your whole life. And I'm listening to that. And I didn't find much of what he said to be particularly offensive. I think that there were two things about it. One, when you talk about the racial move, right? To me, I don't think it had much to do with the game. I just don't think Scottie articulated it very well because I don't know if I'm sure he sees it this way because they've all said these things along different lines. The racial element of that team during that period, you saw it with the Bulls, you saw it with the Warriors, you saw it with the Boston Celtics, with this influx of European players. In a lot of ways, many people in the game believe that it was due to mute the overwhelming influence of black players in the game, that the game was becoming, I think after Bird, by the time you had gotten to the late 80s, the game was as black as it had ever been. The game had been over 80% by the time you got to the late 80s. And all kinds of people, of course, were concerned, especially the networks, that, when the game gets too black, people begin to pull away from it, et cetera, et cetera. And then you start to have this European influence post-Dream Team. And we remember, obviously, that both Scottie and Michael were hazing Tony Kukoc. And a lot of these coaches in the sport, whether it was Don Nelson bringing these guys in from Europe, which is still happening, whether it was Phil Jackson, that they saw the European players being more coachable. They saw the European players being more fundamentally disciplined, even though they didn't play a whole lot of defense. And Pippen is internalizing all of that. He's not crazy. You saw exactly what was happening in the sport. The problem is that Kukoc hit the shot. The problem is that they won the game and he looks terrible because he looks selfish. He looks narcissistic. And they didn't win the series and they didn't win the championship when he was there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when you're Pippen, the message to me, I remember those games really, really well, right? The message was from Phil Jackson, there is no succession here. This is Michael Jordan's team, and now that you're not here, we are an ensemble cast. And that hit Scottie Pippen right in the heart. Anybody who's been in a clubhouse for 5 minutes knows the number one job of the coach is to keep that team happy, to make them all believe they're superstars, to give them the belief system, for them to go out and do what they're doing. And everybody had been talking about this being Scottie's moment. And to not run a play for him, now, obviously, the way it worked out, and it's been almost 30 years later, fine. But what he's saying isn't wrong.
But he
just
didn't,
looks bad.
Howard, but he didn't say it the way that you just said it. He didn't say any of what you just said.
Well, he actually has in a lot of ways, just not in that one interview. I mean, if you go back and look, Scottie, in a lot of ways, when you look at his career, he's been a one-hit note on this, right? I didn't get the ball in 94. He's been carrying this for 30 years. He was saying some of it, in different pieces, whether it's the Last Dance documentary, whether it's here, whether you read David Halberstam's book, Playing for Keeps. All of these different pieces all bring you back to the same road. They didn't give me the ball when it was my turn to be a superstar, right? This is the key. And, you can put me on the dream team. You can put me on the 50 greatest players of all time. You can put me in the Hall of Fame. That was my moment. You took my moment from me. He's going to carry this till he's 80.
Can all of those things be true, and that in that moment Phil Jackson isn't being racist? He's just designing a play for his best shooter, not trying to overcome, as you said, when the game gets too black, people pull away. I don't believe that that is something that exists inside of Phil Jackson in that moment, not consciously, not subconsciously. He's trying to win a basketball game.
Yeah, well, I don't know Phil Jackson, and I'm not speaking for Phil Jackson because I've only met Phil Jackson once. But what I am saying is that if you are a basketball player and you're in May, or I think that was May, right? That wasn't June yet, and you've got an entire season. If you're Scottie Pippen, you're not viewing Phil Jackson based on whether or not he's trying to win a basketball game in that moment. You're judging him based on the entire summer, the entire season, all 7 years that you've been with him before. You're judging him based on what you think of him as a man at that moment. And what you think of him as a man in that moment is going to determine for you the decisions you think he's going to make in that moment. They're not separate. They're the same thing. And, like I said, if you go back and talk to Michael Jordan about this, about what it felt like bringing Tony Kukoc in, Michael Jordan may not tell you the truth, but everybody knows there's a racial component to that. Now, in that moment, is Scottie Pippen right? No, because you're still trying to win the game. But that doesn't mean that what he's saying doesn't have the umbrella of all the other stuff you bring to the table.
They don't haze Kukoc that way. They don't undress him that way if he's black, correct? Like that was one of the ingredients.
Yeah, and Jerry Krause doesn't tout him as the second coming if he's black. That's the whole point, is that whether Drazen Petrovic, Sarunas Marciulionis, Tony Kukoc, it was happening back then. Especially, and if you look at what's happened in the game 30 years later, the white American basketball player is the guy who disappeared with the European influx, not the black player. The game's still just as black as it was then. So I think there's a couple of things at work that you have to be able to parse. Now, obviously, the explosive part of it is one person calling somebody else a racist, right? And so, that piece of it, Phil Jackson's got to carry that on his own. And if you follow Phil Jackson's comments, look, I say this all the time when it comes to the NBA. If you take the talent out of the NBA, take the players out, that game is just as white as IBM or Apple or any other industry. Right? I mean, and just because you're around a whole bunch of black people doesn't mean you respect them. Doesn't mean you like them. Doesn't mean that you have some sort of special insight to them. They just do all the work. So to me, I think that where Scottie falls apart with this is the rest of us are looking at this and go, damn, Scottie, at the end of the day, you won. You got 6 championships. You're in the Hall of Fame. You're one of the greatest defensive players of all time. You're one of the greatest number 2s of all time. That's not enough for him. But that doesn't mean that what went down in that situation and the way he views Phil Jackson makes him a madman. I just don't think it does.
There are so many layers to this that are interesting to me. And one of them, Howard, is whether it's Michael Jordan's hissing, angry Hall of Fame speech or the general bitterness that Scottie Pippen is carrying around. It seems to have been lost. You guys won, man. It's not just That's you right. won that game, Scottie. You guys won forever.
That's right. And you were unbeatable and you're unimpeachable. But look, I mean, like I said, we cover sports. We're in sports for a living. And when you're around these guys, we all know what that ego is. We all know what they bring to it. And that ego is what drives them, but it also what makes moments like this sort of hard to comprehend when at the end of the day, they're all winners, right? I mean, you're Scottie Pippen.
You know the history of all of this, all of it, Howard, because you're well-read and you love that sports is a funhouse mirror for society. And when you say, when the game gets too black, people pull away, the last year specifically of black players being publicly black in that sport in a way that's been stronger than you will find in the other male sports, you have made what of the tension that you find there that rises to the place of Kyrie Irving saying what he says before going to Boston and Russell Westbrook having popcorn thrown at him and Trae Young being spit on in New York?
Yeah, you can't separate these two things. You can't separate them. And today you can't separate them because the stakes are higher. Because in the back of everybody's mind, at least in the back of my mind, when you're watching all of this, you can't separate this from January 6th. I mean, this country's being torn apart right now. It's coming apart right in front of us. And these things are not unrelated to each other. I mean, the other piece of this is that you go back and look at what happened last summer, and all the players, whether it was LeBron James and those guys walked out, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Orlando Magic, all of them, when they took their pause, they went to Barack Obama, and Obama told them, go back to work, be good citizens, buy into the system, do your voter registration drives, go back to work, be all of those things, be Americans. And then you contrast that with what happened on January 6th. Those players aren't stupid. They see the double standard. They see exactly what's happening.
I really want to thank you, Howard, for really shining a light on the Scottie Pippen stuff in a way that I hadn't really heard. You made it a very macro societal conversation. I thank you for that. But are we minimizing the fact that he's been on a promo tour drinking straight bourbon out of the bottle for an entire week? Because you sit me down and I'm drinking bourbon for 2 days. A lot of shit from 30 years ago is going to be pouring out of me.
Yeah, man. In alcohol veritas, right? I mean, once again, he may be drunk, but he's not lying, right? I mean, and yeah, I mean, this is, people have said that. Yeah, sure, but he's out there on a promo tour, and that's all true. And we can talk about that part of it as well. I mean, sure, when you've got something to say. But here's my question for the promo tour. This is getting Scottie Pippen attention to sell whatever alcohol he's selling, but does he look better? Is it good attention? I mean, I guess all attention is good attention, but I don't see the last 48 or the last 24 hours being good for the way people view Scottie Pippen. I see Scottie Pippen unburdening himself with something that he's been tired of. He doesn't look better. I mean, listen to the interview with Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick is essentially did not even address what Pippen was saying about, to me, the next obvious question is, why do you feel that way about Phil Jackson? What went on between the two of you over the years you've been with that team?
Your approach is the right approach, because I come away with it looking like shit. I'll have what he's having.
I feel like we need more interviews where we liquor up all the athletes. We'll stop getting these.
Let's not forget in The Last Dance. I'm looking at going, what's Michael got in that glass? That looks like some fine añejo tequila, and as it turns out, it was his tequila. It was Oro, right? So, drinks on me.
Speaking of this stuff, Jalen Rose had to walk back and apologize for a comment that he made, or felt the need to walk back and apologize for a comment that he made that is in this vein, where he was saying that Kevin Love is tokenism at the Olympics. And we have seen, right, Howard, you remember there was a dream team that people really, really did not like, and they didn't like it for a number of different reasons, but one of the reasons is the stuff that you're talking about, which is sometimes you make this stuff too black and a whole lot of people get uncomfortable. A whole lot of the customers who aren't black get uncomfortable. So when Jalen Rose says Kevin Love is there because of tokenism and then feels the need to apologize to his mother and the greats that came before him, your thoughts are what?
Oh, my thoughts are, at some point, there's certain things that we all say we want to have the truth in conversations. We don't. And there's certain things you want to talk about. You don't really want to talk about them, right? I mean, look at what's going on in all of the games. There's a certain level of conversation that we're allowed to have if you want to maintain your employment and if you want to maintain your respect, right? And then once you cross that line, then all of a sudden you are endangering your own position, not because what you're saying is wrong or has no merit or is unfair. It means that there's just a certain level that people don't want to have. Was it a shot at Kevin Love? Absolutely. Was it unfair to Kevin Love? Absolutely. Is there a reason to apologize? Because why are you making Kevin Love catch a stray? Absolutely. All those things are reasons to apologize. But if you really want to have a conversation about race and sports, you better tighten up your belt, because there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't want to hear. And everybody feels that the reason why none of these conversations are worth having is because of the money. Well, you're rich, so therefore, right? But if you don't want to talk about the money part, you want to talk about human to human to human over the course of the industry, then tighten up. This is what it is.
Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. You can have all those conversations now. You don't have
I never had to worry about it before, because I'm not on TV. I can say what I say. That's why I write books.
You are on TV now. We put you on YouTube. It's telling you are allowed to do this now. You're allowed to be 100% free.
I'm just a guest. I can come in and say what I want.
Good talking to you, Howard. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. See you guys.
You're hearing what the Atlanta Hawks home arena sounded like when Giannis Antetokounmpo stood at the free throw line in Game 3. The audio is from @ATLJohnson18 on Twitter, but if you're at home, you could hear it plain as day too. Atlanta fans counted out loud because they felt, just like the Brooklyn fans before them and the Miami fans before them, that the referees were not doing their jobs. Last series, James Harden and Brooklyn head coach Steve Nash expressed a sense of hopelessness on the issue. Nash saying,
I don't know. The whole thing's kind of confusing. Is it a rule? Is it not a rule? Are we calling it? Are we not calling it?
Giannis free throws take longer than space launch proceedings at Cape Canaveral. Giannis walks out to half court, slowly trots back to the line, waves off the referee so he can slowly mime a free throw shot. And once he gets the ball, he takes a deep breath, spins the ball in his hands, dribbles not once, not twice, but 6 times. And then after all that, he takes another deep breath and then finally shoots the ball. On Sunday, it seemed like the whole state of Georgia desperately wanted to prove that Giannis has been routinely taking longer than 10 seconds on his free throws, which, as you probably know, is a clear violation of NBA rules. In the official NBA rulebook, right there on page 30, it says, Section 1A, when a free throw is awarded, an official shall put the ball in play by delivering it to the free throw shooter. The shooter shall be above the free throw line, and within the upper half of the free throw circle, he shall attempt the free throw within 10 seconds of controlling the ball. Fans in the road arena may be quicker on their clock, but referees aren't calling the violation, or at least not consistently. Giannis has been called for 2 10-second violations, a month ago in Game 1 against the Miami Heat, and another one in Game 3 of the Brooklyn Nets series. And outside of those two, Antetokounmpo has taken 116 free throws, and the overwhelming majority of them have been over 10 seconds. Actually, by my trusty stopwatch on my iPhone app, Giannis exceeds not just 10 seconds, but 11 seconds on over 75% of his free throws. You don't trust my hand? Well, one former NBA referee sent me their tracking data, which showed that in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Antetokounmpo averaged a whopping 12.4 seconds on his 8 free throws, breaking the rules on every single attempt. None, of course, were whistled for a violation. The league finally took a stance last Wednesday. On the last 2-minute report, the league office determined that referees should have called a violation on Giannis' last 2 free throws, which came down 3 with 5 seconds left. He made both free throws to close the deficit to 1, but the league says they shouldn't have been counted because, and I quote, Antetokounmpo does not release his free throw attempt within 10 seconds. Luckily for the Hawks, they won anyway, and the game wasn't protested. But don't be surprised if this escalates and a game is protested on the grounds that Giannis Antetokounmpo's free throws shouldn't count. This has admittedly become a bit of a sideshow in the Bucks games, but this should be a major story. This isn't a judgment call like a block charge where the violation is in the eye of the beholder. This 10-second violation could be called by my 4-year-old daughter. She can't even tie her own shoes. We're working on that. So when I'm watching these games, it feels like I'm missing something. Like, do you feel that too? Like maybe we're overlooking some obvious reasons why officials aren't calling this. So I called up Don Vaden and Shelly Russey of the player development consultant company called Third Side Coaching. Don was a veteran NBA official who was once the former director of NBA officials, and Shelly is a former longtime referee. And together, they've helped educate NBA players and teams on the NBA rules and explain why certain calls are made or not made, and how do I say this? Manage the rule book. Here's Shelly.
We're really educating players on the rules of the game, how the rules are going to be interpreted, what's legal, what's illegal in this particular situation, right? So when you drill down into the rule book to the nuances, these players are the best players in the world, and they make the adjustments. The hard part, I think, really of what we're trying to address here is consistency versus accuracy, and they don't always apply in the same, right? So consistency and accuracy apply in these plays that have answers. Like they just have to be officiated and adjudicated and ruled upon without any emotion, right? Now, there is going to be that human element or the variability, but maybe my count's a 5.1 and yours is a 5.3. I mean, we can try our best, but there's going to be some human variance in that, or a 10.1 or a 10.3 or something. But if your count's a 11 and mine's 9, no, we got to get together and bring it into a bit more consistency.
Here's Don.
On February 12th of 2012, Kobe hit a shot to win the game in Toronto. And just before that, there was a 5-second violation that our referee called and took the ball away from Toronto, who were up 1 at the time. And so all they had to do was get it in bounds, and Lakers had to take a foul. Instead, there was a 5-second violation. It took us a while, but we didn't have a replay center at that time to go back and get all the video from. But after a couple hours, we determined that the violation took place within 5.8 seconds. And so, I'm all excited and happy that we actually got the call right. We enforced the rule correctly. And the commissioner called my office and said, why did it take so long? Why was it 5.8? The rule says 5.0. So when I started talking to referees on staff, we realized that when people were counting, we were counting differently. It was 1,001, 1,002, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or 1,000, 2 1,000. And we were anywhere from 4.8 to about 8.8 on our counts. So we put an exercise in where everyone used a stopwatch or a clock, and they had to count. And from that point forward through the rest of the season, there was a 200% increase in 5-second violations because we literally went by the rule and enforced 5 seconds.
That's fascinating to me because there is got to be some human element here, is that not only is there pressure from fans in the building to get travel calls right, or to get charge calls right, or get 10-second violation calls right, but there is some human element on judgment calls and whether that was actually a charge or a block. But for something that's timing, you raise the question of, well, why don't we just automate this? Why don't we have a clock in place where, just like for the 24-second violation or the 8-second get it over half court, where if the clock hits 15, then it's a violation. Why don't we have a clock for free throws that just as soon as the 10 seconds is over and the ball is not out of the hands, it's a violation?
Well, that has been discussed. It was discussed in the past. I'm not sure where we're at today with that, but you bring in another element, another outside person. There's a timer at the table. During the regular season, it's the home team brings that person in, or they employ that person. So that's one thing. In the playoffs, they're neutral. They're from other cities that they bring in. But again, you still got to look at when to start the clock and when to stop the clock. And are you going to have a horn that goes off when it's just going out of their hands? And now you got to go to replay to see if it's in or out. There's all kinds of variations to that when you look at it at the end of the day. So putting in the referee's hand to make that decision and just blow the whistle when it's a violation would be the best way to do it. But again, consistency in that count is important. The issue here is she said, we work with teams, we work with players to understand the rules. And in most situations, we can say, well, okay, the referee missed this call because of where they stood or with the view that they had, or, somebody moved in front of them and they got blocked out, or they got it right. And here's the reason why they were right. You didn't do something properly. Your footwork or whatever it was not right. But when they ask you a question about a time limit or, something that has an answer, and you can no longer explain to them why it's being called a certain way, there's an issue.
Shelly, would it help to just have referees do the hand motions? Like, couldn't that just be a quick fix to hold them accountable and have this just more out there that they're counting? And as soon as the referee hits the 10th arm motion, then that's it. That's when the whistle's blown.
I'm not going to speak to a practice that's going to be put in place and something I'm not responsible for anymore, but we do know that embodied practices and somatic practices help direct attention and bring more awareness, helps keep our focus and our attention on what it is that responsibility is. If I'm clicking with my hand or ticking with my hand, however it is, I can direct my attention on that 10-second count, just like we do on the 5-second out of bounds. I can really concentrate and ensure that I have an embodied practice that's visual and evident. And I'm sure there's some training that can be done around that then for the officials. If for some reason there's variability amongst the staff, there's video education that could be done to work with the referees to work on their counts to ensure that there's much more consistency in how we're counting 10 seconds.
Okay, so now that we have heard from the officiating experts, let's get back to the actual competition on the floor. Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, if Giannis is going to miss these free throws anyway, why should we care if the referees allow it or not? From a rules standpoint, this should not be allowed. And there are some things that maybe in the future the NBA can do to prevent this from becoming a huge headline story. Because from a fan perspective, this shouldn't be allowed either. The less time that the world's most athletic players are standing idly around the key, the better. Nobody wants that. Now you might be saying to yourself, hey, Giannis is going to miss these free throws anyway, right? So what's the big deal? For one, and this is no small thing, offensive rebounds off of those Giannis missed free throws can be huge. Remember Drew Holiday's clutch go-ahead three-pointer with 2:45 left in Game 7? That one came off a missed Giannis free throw that took 11.9 seconds. The offensive rebound shouldn't have even been allowed to happen. But Holiday makes the shot to go up 3, and the Nets would eventually lose the game and the series. Season done. So if I'm Atlanta, this is what bothers me most. It's not just that Giannis's made free throws shouldn't count. It's that the missed ones can be extremely costly too. And look, this isn't a call that will drastically change how every NBA game is played. Shelley says that in her 2 decades of refereeing, she can only remember 1 or 2 10-second violations that she called in her career. That's because most players have no problem getting up a free throw in time. But Giannis does, and he's pretty big deal in the playoffs. But is Giannis the only one that has this problem? To that end, I asked Mike Bowie, the analytics guru behind the indispensable site inpredictable.com, to see if he can track which player takes the longest on his trips to the free throw line. Mike is working off the play-by-play and matching it to the real-time clock. And it's not an exact science, and it doesn't only look at the free throw routine once the player gets the ball. But over the last 2 years, the only player that takes longer on trips to the free throw line is Lakers forward Montrezl Harrell. The median elapsed time on a Harrell free throw is 30.2 seconds. Giannis is right behind him at 29.6 seconds. But interestingly enough, the quickest median time is actually by Bryn Forbes, Giannis's teammate, who averages out to 17.3 seconds. So Giannis, can you please take a page out of Bryn's book? Please? And lastly, not enforcing this 10-second rule is just simply bad optics for the league, that it's constantly fighting the perception that some players get the star treatment from referees and others do not. This isn't Pat Connaughton or Bryn Forbes who's taking 13 seconds at the free throw line. This is the most famous player remaining in the playoffs, and the referees and the league are simply looking away. What's happening here is a certain validation of conspiracy theory in the NBA. If you think the league has an agenda and wants Giannis Antetokounmpo to win the NBA title and usher in a new era of NBA superstars, the way he's being handled by referees would certainly confirm your most sinister beliefs. And on top of that, I'll just say it, gambling. If a missed Giannis free throw is the difference between hitting an over-under on points, you're messing with the betting markets too. And part of me feels a little bit like a hall monitor, like I'm a buzzkill or a snitch for pointing out that the league and its officials aren't enforcing a rule against one of its biggest stars. But if bettors and fans and coaches can't get a straight answer as to why this very clear and obvious rule is not being enforced against Giannis, the questions will only get louder. For Meadowlark Media, I'm Tom Haberstroh.